Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'm going to make a Pokemon display diorama for my figurines. I got a lot of figurines and over the years I was thinking about how I want to display them, and I decided to make a diorama fitting for most types of the Pokemon would be the greatest way to do so. So I actually found these kind of wall shelves in the hardware store, and they come in 3 different sizes. This one is the largest one, so I decided to use that for the figurines where I have most of, so the grass and the bug types. And to start off, I want to make a really large tree, so I'm just using some armature wire to give it some stability, and I'm wrapping that together with some copper wire because that was the thinnest wire I had lying around. And then I'm going to cover it in some strips of aluminium foil, and I'm just basically wrapping those around to build the tree out a little bit, because aluminium foil is easy to shape, and if you scrunch it up you don't leave much material, and it's very lightweight. I also decided I want to add a tree fork, so I made a second piece of branch with some leftover aluminium foil, and I'm just gluing it on because I don't want to add more material, and this is the most secure way that it will hold actually onto the rest of the tree. And then I covered it in paper mache just to give it a barrier layer between the clay and the aluminium foil, because aluminium foil is quite slick and I'm worried that the clay might fall off. So I'm using some wood glue and water here. You can use any PVA based glue. I just didn't have any other glue at hand at the moment because my other one ran out, but this one works really well too, so it wasn't a huge issue. And I really have to press these in to make sure that it actually takes the form of the aluminium, because if there's air gaps, the paper mache will not stick as well to the material as it should. And when the layer of paper mache is dry, I can finally add the paper clay. And I chose this one because when it dries, it basically crackles a little bit, and I hope that will help with the bark. And I tried to make it like a swirly type of tree, but after the first few swirls I decided to just cover it and go in with a tool and texture it, because I think it would bulk out way too much, and even with a thin layer it got actually pretty thick. Which, it is a cartoonish tree, so I don't really mind, but I still want to have enough space in the diorama. But yeah, after I basically just cover everything, I'm just spending a lot of time smoothing it out a little bit, and then I'm going in with this random tool that I found, and I'm just making some lines in there to mimic bark. I'm not making it too fine detail because this clay doesn't keep the detail too well, so I'm keeping it really simple. But as I mentioned before, this is a cartoonish tree, so I don't mind if it looks simplistic. And the good thing is it will kind of look like it belongs in the Pokemon universe, hopefully, when I'm finished with it. Now, to start off the painting, I'm just doing a basic black coat, and that is just to fill in all of the gaps, nooks and crannies, to basically do the shading. A paper clay is actually quite easy to color, so I only needed 1 coat of black. And then I'm going in with this burnt umber kind of color, and this yellow is just to give a light base coat, because that will help make the browns pop a little bit more. I could also use white, but I'm afraid that if I miss some spots with the other colors, that it might show through. So this yellow is actually perfect. It will make the tones I put on top look nice and warm. And this is basically just a really heavy dry brush, and afterwards I will just let it dry and start out with the next color, which is a kind of a bit darker, orangey kind of brown. And this one I watered down a little bit before applying, so it's more of a wash, because I didn't want this to be the final color. I just wanted to give the yellow a bit more of a different tone. And also the thinning out helps with me applying it liberally, so it does fill in the cracks so they don't look that dark, but they still look like tree cracks. And then I went in with the actually final color and this is like an orangish brown. It looks a bit more orange on camera. I fixed the settings a bit later. It is actually more like a really warm brown, and I think it looks really nice, and it turned out really well. And afterwards I'm just giving it a black wash, and that will just make sure that any like spots I missed will also get covered in some like paint. The good thing about paper clay also is it absorbs liquid paint stuff really well, so if you actually do a wash it will absorb it pretty easily. Now to make the base I'm just using some paper pieces, and that's just because it's way easier to paint them while they're out of the box and then just glue them in, because inside of the box it's really hard to like get brushes in, especially the smaller ones, and to get like detail. So I'm just starting out by making some slight hill terrain with some more paper clay, and after that dries I'm applying some glue and then a really liberal coating of sand. And this is just some bird sand that we had left over, which I'm always liking for crafting because it is really easy and it doesn't give off that much dust. Because it's basically filtered so your animals don't get lung problems. So yeah, this is really ideal for crafting, and it's really easy to like clean off and take care of and to like repurpose once you get rid of the fallen off pieces. And because this is a woodland, I want to also color the ground green before I apply static grass. Sadly, my camera stopped recording without me noticing, but here's the final result right after I applied the grass. Now the diorama still looked a bit too empty, so I decided to also make like a hollow tree stump where some animals, or I guess Pokemon, can hide in. And I'm using basically the same technique as the tree, just that I'm using a paint tube that I covered in some baking paper because this one should be hollow. And this actually worked out really easily and well, and after it dried I'm just cutting it to size, and then it's on to make some flowers. I sadly also lost the footage to these. I really had a bad camera day apparently, but I at least got the footage still for me making some Pokemon berries. So for these berries I looked at some pictures and decided on the berries I want. I don't know what they're called in English, but they're Xeneberry in German, and basically they're the blue ones that give Pokemon health. So I'm just starting out with a sphere that I'm adding like a smaller, like flattened oval shape on top, and then I'm also adding some leaves. I printed out a cutter with my 3D printer that I also used for making the flower petals, and it worked out really well. I just need to make the edges a little bit sharper. Now the clay I'm using is Cos clay, which is why I'm not worried about anything breaking off. And after I finish the flowers, I'm just adding in some wire and like putting a heavy dose of Cos clay on the back, because I want them to be kind of sturdy, because I'm planning to like maybe put a figurine on top if they hold up. And then all the flowers still needed were some petals on the bottom for, I guess, some leaves. So I'm just making some elongated leaves with a little groove in the middle to make them look leaf-shaped. And then I'm wrapping two on each flower around, and I make sure to shape them nicely. This is actually the first time I'm working with cosplay, and what I noticed is that our oven temperature like seems a little bit higher than what it actually says. Not too much, but cosplay blistered slightly. It didn't burn, it just blistered strangely. So I don't know if that's like because there were air bubbles trapped inside or something. I made sure to knead it through properly, so whatever happened, it wasn't too bad though, but in the end when I put the stuff together with the leaves and the like wire to hold the flowers up, I decided to use my heat gun, and that worked really well. So yeah, I decided to give the flowers a little bit of a gradient, so I'm starting off with a yellow for these ones and then going in with a light orange, before painting in the middle in a brown, and then of course the wire later in a nice dark green. I also made sure that the liberal amount of cosplay I'm using in the back is stable enough to secure the wire, because I plan on maybe putting some like light figurines on top like some butterfly Pokemon or something like that, and I want the flowers to be able to hold them without breaking, which is also why I chose cosplay, because it definitely stays nice and flexible, and it's actually really pleasant to work with. Now the other flowers, I decided to paint the middle first because I had a hard time not staining the petals around, and for these I'm going with an orange to red gradient. So I'm painting the base layer of orange, and then I'm getting the tips of the petals a little bit of red and then blending them in. I did touch up the middles a little bit again afterwards, but it was really easy to fix. And of course all of them get green on the bottom too. And next up it was time to paint the berries, so I'm just using a lighter blue before painting the caps like a little bit of a darker blue, and then I'm also adding some spots with a toothpick, which will be like the dark blue spots, which will be the same color as the top of the berries, and then I'm just painting the leaves. Now some of the leaves fell off while baking, but yeah, it was a really easy fix. I just glued them on later, and afterwards it was basically time to assemble. So the last part I'm going to need is actually some backgrounds. So I'm just painting the side panels and the top in a nice, really light blue, and I'm adding some clouds in, basically just stippled in with some white. And I decided, since this I want this to be a really green, I decided to make it woodland, so I'm just also putting a lot of paint on some of the side panels underneath the clouds, and I'm stippling on that paint. I just chose like a lot of different shades of green. I made like a base layer of a really light green just to mark out where I want them to be, and then yeah, just go ham with my brush and stippling it on, and it gives some nice variation. I could have drawn like detailed layered tree shapes, but I really didn't want that. I wanted to keep it simple. And for the back I basically did the same as for the side panels. And then it was just time to glue, and I actually got a new bottle of PVA glue in, so I can use that for gluing it in. So I'm just applying this liberally to all sides with a brush, and then I'm pressing in the paper. Now this glue normally doesn't really warp paper, but for some reason it did slightly, so there are some like air bubbles on the side, but it wasn't that bad. I also made a tiny tree stump that I want to cover in some moss, because I want to add the berries in later. But first I decided to glue on the flowers, and for the first try I'm just using the PVA glue, and then I decided to try out super glue, but that didn't really work, so I went back to the PVA glue, although it took quite a while to dry, but definitely held them in way better. And before I'm going to add any further items, I decided to just basically put on the back, which was a thing of just putting glue on the back, laying it flat so the back was flat, and then just putting the back on. It was super simple, and it held up really well. I might reinforce it in the future with some acrylic or something, but for now this craft paper is actually really sturdy. Now next up, of course, we also need some leaves for the tree. I first made some foam boards, pre-made foam boards, and I colored them green, but they didn't really look that well. So I just used them as a base to like bulk out the shape of the leaves, and then I made a lot of felted balls. Now I'm not using like full balls for the most part, just for the tiny areas. I'm cutting them in half to have like spheres to make it look like a bit more fluffy. And that worked out amazingly well. I used a lot of green felt, obviously, but with the help of the wool that I used before, it definitely became a nice fluffy looking free leaf shape, in my opinion. And yeah, with this I'm also just using PVA glue, putting like spheres of the felted bolts in there, and I'm just trying to make it a little bit random so it looks nice. Now, I wish I had a little bit more felt, but I basically just went until I didn't have any left. But I still think it's a nice, full, lush, like, leaf-looking thing on top. And lastly, I just made the berry bush and put in the berries, and then it was time to put in my figurines. And here's the final result. Now it is really crowded, and that's just because I just put all of my figurines in for now, but for later I want to just keep some of them in here to make like a little like story, like some of them hiding, some of them around the berry bush and so on. But for this now I just wanted to display all of my figurines, and later I'm gonna just make a simple display shelf for most of them, and then just, as I said, make like a cute little diorama. I'm actually really happy on how this turned out. I'm not quite sure about the background and the side panels, although, as I said, I wanted to make them simple and that definitely worked, but I might replace them later. Luckily, they should be really easy to take out, except for maybe where I glued on the leaves, so we will see how that goes if I ever do that. But yeah, I think it turned out perfectly as I envisioned it, and I think it fits the figurines quite well since it's such a simple but yet detailed style. And I had a lot of fun trying out different things, like the tree with the paper clay definitely worked out amazingly, as did the tree stump, and I definitely have to say I also enjoyed working with cosplay. But this is only part 1 of 3, because I still have 2 other dioramas to make, so we will see later on how those go. Now, I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you maybe got some inspiration on how to display your figures, if you have some, that you want to display in like a more epic way than just putting them into like a tiny shelf display. And yeah, I hope it was pleasant to watch it, and I hope you guys have a great day. See you in the next video. Bye!